starting there. Okay, and we're going to go live in 1, 2, 3. Hello and welcome to our discussion today, brought to you by the National Center for Equity and Agency on the future of SAPR and SHARP. I'm Dr. Laura McGuire, and today we will be hearing from 3 incredible experts in this space on the past, present, and of course, future of these kinds of efforts around prevention and response to sexual misconduct in the military. So to start us off, I will let each of our guests introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their role, who they are, and how they got into this work. Jennifer, could you start us off?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Laura. I am Jennifer Raymo. I am a licensed master social worker, and I am a sexual assault response coordinator for a General Officer Command in Wichita, Kansas. I to the field in my degree program to as my get out of the Army plan, and when I was graduating, this position came open and I applied, and here I am. So I'm very happy to be in this position and still continue to do soldiers, even though I may no longer be in uniform.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Marissa?
Take myself off mute. So good morning, everyone. My name is Marissa. I am a sexual assault response coordinator out of Los Alamitos, California. I actually work alongside Jennifer. I am in her tech chain, so I'm at the 2-star command. But as far as my background, I have been in the SHARP program, which is the program dedicated to the Army for sexual harassment, assault, response, and prevention since 2011. Started as a collateral duty victim advocate, was able to deploy as a battalion level and a brigade level, which are just different echelons in the Army, as a victim advocate to Afghanistan in 2014 and 15. And then I became a SARC, a full-time SARC in 2018 here at Los Alamitos. So this is definitely something where I tell people, I'm like, I finally figured out what I want to do when I grow up. You know, the passion, it kind of fuels my cup, right? When we help people. I think everyone probably on the call are, we're helpers. We're helpers by nature, and that's kind of what fuels us. So I do love what I do. It is, challenging. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but it's when we have a team with like-minded people, I'm a firm believer in, iron sharpens iron. And so doing things like this, getting the word out. I know we're finishing SAPM, and it's the awareness events that I saw just across social media with the people in my circle. It's really great when you see more and more people starting to share the things that you share or ask questions. And so I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you, Laura, and I'm going to stop talking now. So thanks.
Thank you, Marissa. And Tiana?
Yeah, hi. I am MAJ Tiana Santana Ufary. I am the Special Victim Counsel Program Manager for the Army Reserve. We are located at the Legal Command Headquarters here in Gettysburg, Maryland. And essentially what we do is that we provide legal representation to victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We're so glad to have all of you here. So before we talk about the present and future, I want to just kind of take a second, especially for folks who are joining us and having these conversations or hearing about these terms and these movements for the first time, a little bit of the background, the history of this. So Marissa, I'll ask you in particular, I come from a big military family. And when I got my first job in a SAPR office, they were like, what is that? That is not something we had. What is, more acronyms and more services, and how does this fit in? Or maybe they didn't even have awareness that this was an issue that really was at a level that it needed its own office and personnel to address. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this came to be.
Sure thing. So yeah, so the SHARP program, or the SAPR program's been around for a while, but the SHARP program's fairly, I say, new in the sense of regards when it comes to like prevention and harassment assault response. So so I'll just date myself here. I'm also a reserve soldier. I came in 1997, and there was no SHARP program. We had what was called like CO2, just consideration of others. Like sexual harassment was kind of lumped in with the equal opportunity program. So it was, it was kind of there, but it wasn't, it was like kind of, it was just there. And then of course there was a lot of things that happened, and Congress ended up mandating like, hey, there needs to be a program, there needs to be, policy. And so then SAPR now turned into SHARP for the Army. So, and I'll explain that here, is all of the other DoD services or the branches, they have SAPR, which is Sexual Assault Prevention and Response. And the Army decided to say, you know what, when it was around 2008-ish, and the Army was like, we are going to combine sexual harassment with sexual assault, hence the SHARP program, right? So that stands for Sexual Harassment, Assault Response and Prevention. And, the SHARP program was born. And and so in the beginning, I've been in the program, like I said, since 2011, and I've been able to see it grow. It has morphed so much from the 2011 when I went to school, even from the screening process, because back then it was, you could just go to your training NCO and ask to get slotted for school. And now it is, there's this huge screening process, from a background check, local police checks, sex offender checks. There's interviews, there's all this prerequisites that has to be done, because the Army, as well as the DoD, has realized, like, these are very sensitive positions to put people in. We're considered trusted agent positions. So when you see people like, us in these positions, like it's one, those people, you want them to be there. But it shows that like they've got what it takes, right, to go and kind of take care of people, because you can teach people process all day, right? But it's getting those people who are empathetic, who can really genuinely care for people, right? Those soft skills. So over again, the program has morphed into doing more of that. So at the beginning, it was like response based, like, hey, when this happens, this is who you report to, this is where you go. And we'll talk, I think, a little bit later about some of the policy updates that have come out. But now, like, even over these past, say 5-6 years, you're starting to see a shift in our training, the way we talk. It's gone from being victim focused to now offender focused. It's not, what were you doing there? It's, why did you do that? In a sense, right? To put it simplistically, it is, getting people to address behavior. We're starting to, or we have integrated a lot of bystander intervention, those types of things, to focus more on how do we get to the left, right? How do we get to those healthy environments? How do we get to those optimum work environments? And then it's tied to collaborative efforts with other special programs like EO, because as we know, sexual harassment, the breeding ground for that is gender bias, right? And so gender bias falls into the equal opportunity wheelhouse. So we do partner a lot with our special programs. Suicide prevention as well is another one. So yeah, but that's a little bit on the history on how we became SHARP. But we all, the sister branches under DoD, we all fall under the same umbrella, if you will, when it comes to policy and regulatory guidance under the Department of Defense. Yeah, so hopefully that answered your question.
It does. You did a great job. Thank you. Thank you so much. And that, again, answers a lot of common questions of what is this? What does it do? How does it work? Kind of creating that foundation of understanding. So Jennifer, I would love to ask you next a little bit about your unique role. Again, you have this background in mental health counseling, and how that plays into this space in particular.
So one thing that is really important is that as a SARC or even a victim advocate is we are there for that victim, and we provide that victim advocacy to help that individual with their right to self-determination, allowing them the opportunity and the time to make those options. And whether it's to let's say, for example, to accept SVC services, that can be a big decision for somebody who has had an incident that they are still processing, and they are still figuring out, am I to blame? Is it because I shouldn't have been there? I was wearing the wrong thing, or I drank the wrong amount of alcohol. So they're still processing a lot of those shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And when we step in and like, here's your referrals, here's this, here's that, we have to step back and remember to give them time to process, and also to remind everybody that because of everything going on in their mind and in their head, that they're not going to remember things in order. They're not going to remember that I gave you your victim rights form. So every time I talk to you about electing SVC services, I'm still always going to provide that to you. I'm not going to say, remember, I gave it to you 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. No, I'm just going to give it again, because they're not going to be able to even maybe remember to think that it was given to them. And it's about being patient and realizing that we are on their timeline. We're not on anybody else's timeline. And I know that's a hard concept for maybe our law enforcement officers to recognize, because they want to get in, they want to collect that evidence before anything gets ruined, and they want to do what they need to do. That victim, though, may be still in that position of shock and not really processing what had happened yet. Even if we're going to talk about sexual harassment, by the time an individual may have realized that the behavior that they encountered was sexual harassment, may be 6, 8 months later. And then they want to come forward and make a report. I'm not going to tell them, no, you can't, because per the regulation, you missed that timeline. I'm going to support them on their decision to make that report, whether it's a formal or informal. I'm going to help them through that process and explain to the commander, to whoever's involved, to say, this is when they recognized that this behavior was harassment, that they were having these issues. And if we don't do something, then that is going to increase further issues for not only that soldier, but anybody else who may be experiencing harassment. And following through is big, and ensuring that we're maintaining that communication with our individuals who've come to us, to let them know that I recognize this process is slow. Here are updates. How are you? Just those checking in, those checkpoints with them is important, because then there's that fear of, I shouldn't have made the report. They don't believe me. They forgot about me. I'm not important. And then we start to digress. So it's important for us as advocacies to ensure that we're still doing that and we're still touching base with them. And then also informing the command, informing our force that this is what happens to the brain when an individual's traumatized and how that works. And again, that's going back to instead of being reactionary like the force has been, we're going into preventative. And we're also discussing the impact trauma has and more trauma-informed care for our leaders in the military.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for saying all of that. And yes, very much reflecting that survivor experience. As a survivor myself, I'm like nodding along and saying, yep, all of that, very much mirrors what I've seen firsthand, but also working with victims for many years. As much education has been done, there is still so much yet to do. And I know when we connected, and I did a training in September out in California, the trauma-informed care piece was still new to a lot of folks even in those roles, right? So there's just a lot more to explore and touch on so that everyone gets on that same page and can serve victims and survivors effectively. Tiana, now you have a really important and unique space here as well from the legal side. I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about that and how it's evolved recently.
Sure, absolutely. So as you know, we are involved on the legal part of the matter. So usually we work together with the SARCs and VAs. We get the referral from them. And then if the person is eligible for services, we will assign an SBC to take care of the victim. So what the SBC will do is essentially empower, advocate for that victim, or better say survivor. So sorry about that. So that's essentially our role. You know, usually when you go to a court martial, the perpetrator, he's being represented by an attorney. So why we don't provide a representation to the victim as well? So that's how the program came about. So we are here to support, to advocate, to empower that survivor, essentially. So that's what we do.
Awesome. And how has that grown in the past few years? Again, I know this is kind of a new thing. Can you explain a little bit of its evolution?
So this program started back in 2013, essentially out of an Air Force case. And the first one to have this was the Air Force, and then all the branches now has SBC councils to empower and represent victims. As for the reserve, so we have now a program detailed for Army Reserve soldiers. And so far, we have been, we are actually located across the United States, and we are empowering and representing victims. Normally, because of our nature, normally we are not that involved in court martials, but we are involved in Army separation boards, and we provide sometimes advice to the victim during the civilian law enforcement investigation. We cannot go with them to court, civilian court, but we can advise the victim. So that's essentially how it has evolved, and probably, likely, it will continue evolving. So more to follow to see what happens next.
That's so exciting because that's so important. You need that really holistic support to navigate these kinds of experiences. So thank you for doing that and seeing this evolve. You know, thinking again about Marissa, you touched on the intersectional piece of this, right? That if we're going to prevent violence, we have to look at the systemic issues that cause these kinds of beliefs and behaviors to go on, right? That cause people to excuse them or say it's no big deal, or, you know, again, victim blame and shame people who have experienced trauma. And I know, again, in our training, we talk about things like LGBTQ inclusion, overcoming the psychology, where's the resistance coming from, where people don't get on board with these conversations. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you see things now, how they've really come to this different place, and where you hope they evolve continually in the future.
Sure, great question. And yes, spot on with that intersectionality, and like we call it cross-pollination, right? It's just getting other programs, other soldiers, leaders aware of how the programs work. And that's one of the things that we do when we talk to leadership, when we go out to these briefs and, you know, talking to soldiers even, is getting them to understand, like, even our program, it's not a stovepipe, right? It's not just, oh, a sexual assault occurs, here's the reporting process, and that's it. With regard to notification, yeah, it's like that. But when it comes to really assisting and understanding all the background and the complexities that come along with it, it is like a spider web, if you will, right? Because let's just take a soldier who was sexually assaulted, and, you know, they could start to have performance issues, right? And if they don't tell anyone and they're trying to hold on to that, if the leadership isn't aware of even knowing their soldier, right? Or let's just take going back to that gender bias, all those things that are left unchecked along that continuum, understanding the culture and the climate within a unit. All of these things are what's being talked about in our training, EO's training, suicide prevention. It's on, and even ADCO. So we do have alcohol and drug counselors. We have an ASAP program for substance abuse. So all of these programs work together in, active component. They are, I would say, a little bit easier to access all of those because they're typically on the same installation. For reserve command, it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, especially because of being geographically dispersed. But we make it happen, or there's ways to get effective training and collaborative talks going on. With even looking at our campaigns recently, so on how it's always been, I guess you could say like a stigma maybe, or a stereotype of where it's always male on female, right? Well, now within just these past few months, DOD has come out with a men's campaign, right? And that is huge. And I mean, I think in the civilian world, you're like, yeah, it's like, but for DOD, like, it's finally like, hey, there is a men's campaign now, and it's huge. It has just come out. It went out across the DOD. So it's things like that, change, small, it's not small change, but it's these things that are happening that you're like, wow, okay, someone up there, they're getting it, and they're pushing it down, or they're listening to the voice of the people, that, because you also look at the reports, right? If you look at the annual reports, even though the percentage of the males may be down, but there's more males in the military than there are females. And we are starting to see an increase in male survivors coming forward. I'll give a small little snippet here. In 2020, I was in Kuwait at Camp Arif John, and I was there as a brigade SARC, which is what I do here, but just in uniform. And so just to give you an idea, our brigade footprint, like how many soldiers we were, or I was, assisting, was about 3,000-ish. All right, so it's a pretty large footprint spread out. But with regard to cases, so from about February to November, I did a trends and analysis based on the cases that we had come in. And what was astonishing, not just to me, but to the leadership, because I was able to provide it, of course, just data, was that the ratio between male and female survivors was almost a 1-to-1. So at one point we had 11 cases, and it was 6 female survivors compared to 5 male survivors. That was huge, because when I showed that, we had meetings with our collaborative groups, and the leaders were like, this is really, because it wasn't all from one command, it was just the whole footprint. But that right there was significant, because like, these are the actual facts. Like, these are like what has happened while we're here, whether they're delayed reports or not. The matter of the fact was, wow, we are at almost a 1-to-1 ratio when it came to male female survivors. So it's talks like that, it's getting information out to get leaders aware, like, oh wow, like this, it's not just a women's issue, right? Another thing that you're seeing, there is, and I love it, working along my counterparts who are male SARCs, male victim advocates, and they're on fire, and it's wonderful to work alongside and be able to give a choice to the victim or to the survivor to say, would you like to work with a male or a female? Giving them that option. So having that diversity as well is huge, in our program, and that to me is another positive thing, that we've got people, stepping up to the plate. It doesn't matter rank. We've got other campaigns. They're starting with DOD as a prevention workforce. The Army and DOD is looking at that. I know this is huge, because as far as the reserve command, that's something that we don't have, trying to get a prevention workforce that is focused on that primary prevention. Because right now what we do, if you look at our program SHARP, it's really secondary prevention, right? The incident has already happened, and now we're providing, and then we're bringing awareness, and all of those things are wonderful, but it's like, how do we get to where these things don't even happen? And so those talks are happening. again, amongst the different groups and working with our civilian counterparts. I can tell you that in December, because I attend our SART, which is the sexual assault response team for like the local community. And in December, I was able to share with them, how, what it's like to work with military survivors. Because again, I think as Tiana and I think even Jennifer mentioned, is that we do have cases, especially in the reserve world, that are handled in the civilian sector, whether it's a civil case, local law enforcement. So building those networks and connections as well to be able to better support survivors, whether they're geographically dispersed, working with the local rape crisis centers, not just internal military programs. And then working with, organizations like yourself, right? Getting the word out, educating us, that training that you provided in September on LGBTQ and working with survivors of, like that, the feedback that we received, we loved it. It was great because we need more of that education, how to, what's the best way to respond, things like that. So it's getting there, yeah.
It is, and thank you for touching on so many of those different spaces. Yeah, it's getting there, and the exciting thing is the more we plant these seeds, the more they grow. And again, we really eventually see that paradigm shift where people are like, yeah, this is of course something we talk about. Of course, we shouldn't assume a survivor belongs to a certain gender or race or ability, et cetera. But it takes a lot of unlearning. It takes time to do that. We're at our kind of closing time, and Jennifer, I would love to hear your thoughts on, again, the future of SAPR Sharp, as well as, any ways that people can connect with you if they'd like to learn more about your work.
Yeah, I'm excited with the direction that SAPR and SHARP programs are moving into looking at more advocacy, more programs, and recognizing and promoting that it isn't just one gender, one female, and that we're bringing in the men's campaigns, and we're identifying and recognizing our LGBTQ plus community in the military is important. I can be, found on LinkedIn, and you could go ahead and post my LinkedIn on there and reach out to me if there's any questions. I'm always trying to stop the misinformation that gets put out on social media, or if it's a reservist who is having a difficult time finding who they need to go to, I'm going to help. I'm going to help you get to who you need to get to, and do that warm handoff, take care of you. I hope I'm able to provide a safe space for anybody who needs support.
Yes, thank you for offering that and saying that. I have had a number of people reach out through LinkedIn, right, in particular, and say, I don't know who to go to, or I'm dealing with this issue, who do I call? And having that kind of Rolodex, that network of people to say, yes, let me connect you with these individuals is huge, and such, I think, under-discussed service that we can all provide. Tiana, I'd love to, again, hear your thoughts on the kind of future of things, some closing things for folks to take away, as well as ways that people can get connected.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn too. So if you want to reach out to me and ask me questions, particularly about the Army Reserve SBC program, reach out to me. On the future, I obviously have seen a change on the victim bias. Now we have victims that are male, because we are moving slowly to a place that we don't have the bias that we had before, and that's where we're moving. So ultimately, what we want is to eradicate this problem. We don't want to have more sexual assault in the Army. We don't want to have more domestic violence in the Army. So that's essentially the goal. But again, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate this and having a forum to reach out. Again, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me, just connect with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I love that thought of, eventually our goal is always that these things wouldn't be an issue, right? Like that we wouldn't have to change careers. All of us would be like, there's no more work. We solved the problem. It's all done. Sadly, with so many things going on, I think there's a lot of years ahead of this, but still keeping that kind of vision objective in mind. Marissa, final thoughts, and again, ways people can connect with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for hosting this and just getting the word out, because this is part of it. Like when we did our Denim Day event, this past Wednesday, one of the things I mentioned is, a lot of people, you wore jeans. Some people didn't even know. And that's the thing, is we are so immersed in this and we're like, yeah, you should know it's Denim Day. There's still so many people out there that didn't know the story behind why we wear jeans. So that let me know is like, we can't get tired. We can't, and we do get tired. We need to, rub elbows with people like everyone here on the call and, get that refuel to say, okay, no, this is our passion. This is our mission. So we can't get weary. And if we do, we've got, brothers and sisters, battle buddies, friends, counterparts, collaborative partners to help us along the way. But I am on LinkedIn. My name there is, Marissa Saucedo. You can find me wearing a black polo as well. I guess black polos are my thing. I don't know. I'm noticing that. But I just, like Jennifer, and Tiana, we are here to help. We're just, again, thank you for today. I'm just going to try to stop talking because I just want to just continue to talk. I can talk about this stuff all day, but I do appreciate you, this time, and this forum, this platform, because, it takes awareness and then action, and then that's what equals social change. So this is a start. We got to keep these talks going. So thank you.
Absolutely. And again, hopefully we can do this again in the future, talk about some more nuanced topics in this space, because there is just so much to cover and it always feels like there's never enough time. Thank you to everyone who joined us live today. We will also have a recording of this available if anyone would like a copy of that. And again, thank you to our amazing panelists for bringing their perspective and insight into this vital conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. I'll see you guys on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Laura. Yes. Bye.